It was nice work.
Yes, it was.
Thanks, Doug. Good evening. Sally Fisk has a night off. Mark Wallen is joining us. Tropical storm Elena is on the move tonight and packing 55-mile-an-hour punching. Key West is getting the worst of it, while Dade and Broward are feeling only the fringe effects of the storm.
We will have complete nightside coverage, but first, let's get the storm's latest location from News Center 7's Don Franklin live at the National Hurricane Center. Don.
Okay, fellas, we're at the National Hurricane Center, the 9 o'clock position on our tropical storm Elena. It has reformed, and the center of it now is at 23.2 north, or was it 9 o'clock, 82.0 west. That puts it about 95 miles south of Key West. The folks here at the National Hurricane Center have been very, very busy tracking it, trying to figure out where it's going to go. And Bob Sheets, the hurricane forecaster, is here with us. Bob, what do you see in the future for this storm?
Well, it's going to move out over the Gulf, and it's very favorable for strengthening, so we expect it to strengthen to a hurricane sometime tomorrow.
Now, if it does move into the Gulf, as it's forecast to do, and it does wind up into a hurricane, that basically will clear the Miami area from any danger, right?
Yes, we've gotten about what we're going to get, the gusty winds and the showers here, and the same thing in the Florida Keys. The main threat now is the strengthening process out into the Gulf, and then probably the northeastern Gulf Coast.
I noticed we had a 51-mile-an-hour gust here on the roof of the Hurricane Center a little while ago.
That's right. We've had it a couple of times this evening, but we just had a band come across. Those same kind of things have been occurring all through the Florida Keys tonight. So we've had 45 to 55-mile-per-hour winds all the way down through the Keys.
But these are mostly in squalls. They're gusty winds, right?
That's right. Mostly gusty winds. Now, we're getting some sustained winds in the lower Keys because they're on the edge of the system. But, again, we're talking about 45 to 50 miles per hour.
And we had a tornado reported in the Sarasota area earlier this evening. That's all part of the banding process?
Yes, that was one of those bands that moved across us in the early afternoon and went all the way up there.
Okay, thanks very much, Bob. Appreciate it. Bob Sheets, hurricane forecaster here at the National Hurricane Center, and we'll be bringing you satellite pictures of the storm as it has progressed across Cuba and on toward the Gulf of Mexico a little bit later on in the news. Peter, Mark?
Thank you, Don. News Center 7's Brian Cabell is following the storm along Florida's northwest coast. He joins us now live via our News Star 7 satellite. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Peter. We are still chasing Elena. We are about 150 miles west of Tallahassee, and we are headed that way. The best guess, we are told now, is that it may hit around Cedar Key, Tarpon Springs, perhaps as far south as Tampa Bay. The evacuations that we've witnessed all along the Gulf Coast in Mississippi, Alabama, the Western Panhandle apparently were for naught. Those people will come back, and it looks like the evacuations will occur further south and further east. But we are chasing the eye of the storm. When we get it, we'll have the pictures. But right now, we are just in a little hunt for Elena.
Brian, I hope it stays as calm as this for you during the whole process. This is a fairly busy day for you chasing this hurricane.
Yeah, we've lost track of time. We've been on it now for about 36 hours, and frankly, we talked about it a few minutes ago, a couple hours ago, and we thought it had been 3 days. It's actually only been about a day and a half. We really are just constantly on the road looking for the latest weather maps, and frankly, we're starting to wonder whether there is a hurricane out there.
Oh, it's there. It's there. You can see it on the weather map. Stay safe. I hope you have a good trip. We'll look forward to
this. All right, we should run into it by tomorrow. I guarantee it.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
News Center 7's Brian Cabell reporting live by News Star satellite from Defuniak Springs in northwest Florida. We'll have more from him soon.
Our hurricane vigil on this Labor Day weekend, once again, with News Center 7's Don Franklin.
It's been quite a vigil, too.
Yes, it has.
It's been a very interesting storm so far. The interesting part about it, of course, is the fact that it's not here.
Right.
So we can talk about it kind of academically, you know. Yeah. But the interesting part about it is the steering currents became so weak today, and the thing just started kind of meandering around. Dr. Neil Frank of the National Hurricane Center is kind enough to join us again tonight. Welcome, Mr. Frank.
Okay, good evening, Don.
How are you doing down there?
Well, we're doing all right. If we could figure out what the weather was going to do, it'd make our job a lot easier, though.
Well, this storm now seems to be drifting more toward the east.
Yeah, the reports that we've had this evening from the NOAA airplane certainly confirm what the Air Force plane found earlier in the day, that the storm had turned towards the east or the east-northeast, and it's moving, I think, on a rather steady course now, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Now, the steering current isn't strong, but it's strong enough, apparently, to move this storm along at a fairly nice clip, and it does look like that it's going to move on up towards the upper part of the peninsula or up in the Big Bend area sometime tomorrow.
Well, Dr. Frank, since that's kind of a cup affair up in that Big Bend area, won't that have more of a tendency to push a surge ahead of it, perhaps a little higher than would be if it went into the central Gulf Coast?
No question about that. That's one of the worst places in the United States as far as the storm surge is concerned, because it's very shallow up there. So even a weak hurricane, like this one, a respectable hurricane, I might call this one, is capable of putting 8 to 10 feet of, or maybe even up to 12 feet of storm surge up in that area.
As far as we know at this point, can you prognosticate any time for a landfall tomorrow?
Well, they're already getting some squalls. The outer squalls with this storm have affected part of that area tonight. So what you're going to see is deteriorating condition as we go through the rest of the night and on into tomorrow morning. And the center should get up near the coastline sometime midday or late tomorrow afternoon.
Well, we understand there's about a 10-inch rainfall forecast from this storm as it does go inland. That's going to give some problems to the folks a little further back offshore, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. That'll give you a lot of problems back in the inland areas and maybe up on into South Georgia. We'll just see how the whole thing evolves. The amount of rainfall, that you get with a hurricane is a function of how fast it's moving, not how strong the winds are. So if this storm moved, even got up into that area and began to move a little bit slower, you could have a lot of rainfall there.
And don't we also wind up with some tornadoes as part of an aftermath of a hurricane, or part of it?
No question about that. There is a chance that you could have an isolated tornado up there tonight.
So at this time, then, we have the hurricane warnings extended southward from where they were before.
Oh, yeah. We've extended them on down across the Tampa Bay area because Tampa Bay is so vulnerable. And we need to get some of those folks on those islands back to the inland areas tonight. And we felt like that by putting the hurricane warnings up there, that might prompt better action than if we just left it gales and talked about winds maybe blowing near hurricane force.
Fine. Thanks very much, Dr. Frank. I expect we'll see you again in 24 hours worth on tomorrow. It's been a long crank for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And Bob Soper has been watching Elena's every move. He's here now with the latest coordinates. Bob?
Oh, for sure, Stephanie. I'll tell you, it's been a problem child. First, we thought it would be heading toward Mobile, Alabama, then toward Pensacola, then Panama City, and finally all the way over to Cedar Key. Take a look at our latest satellite loop, and we can show you where she's been and where she's trying to go. Although it is stationary at this point, Elena is moving closer and closer to the northwest coast of Florida, up there around the northwest or northeastern Gulf of Mexico. We'll put in the statistics for you in just a second, but you can see the white part. That really is the most dangerous part of the storm. That is moving ever closer to the area of the northern part of the state. We enhanced it with the red. It's 28.9 north, 83.9 west. That's about 55 miles west-southwest of Cedar Key, about where it's been since noon today. Winds of 100 miles per hour. It is simply not moving. So, therefore, hurricane warnings continue from about Port St. Joe, a little west of Apalachicola, all the way down to Sarasota. That's the most dangerous area. Then gale warnings extend from Sarasota to Fort Myers. Tides are going to run 4 to 6 feet above normal from Fort Myers to Sarasota. And in that hurricane warning area, tides possibly could go as high as 12 feet above normal. Here's where it's been, and there's where it's going. And with us now, Dr. Neil Frank, to help us understand what's going on. Now, St. Petersburg is going to have a high tide roughly 4 o'clock in the morning. Dr. Frank, what's this going to mean to them in St. Petersburg or even north of that area?
Well, Bob, the real dilemma again tonight is that we've got a hurricane that looks like it's stalled. We talk about these rivers in the air that move hurricanes along. And whenever that river weakens or runs dry, then the hurricane just stalls and it doesn't go anyplace. As a matter of fact, it'll be like a top. It'll just spin around there doing its own thing. It doesn't necessarily stay at one point, but it'll wobble around in directions, and then we don't have any skill to know where it's going to go until another river becomes defined and moves it off in some direction.
Dr. Frank, this is not the first time this has happened. As I understand it, we had something like this around 1958, brought tons of water into North Florida. Is it possible to happen again?
Well, absolutely. Let's put that storm in 1950. I think it was in 1950 that we had a hurricane by the name of Easy that stalled for 2.5 days in about this same region and dumped 38 inches of rain on Yankeetown in 24 hours. So heavy rains, high tides, hurricane force winds are going to be continue along that northwest Florida coast unless this moves offshore far enough that they're going to get some relief.
Is there any danger now to southeastern Florida? We know for sure that it looks like it's going to mostly affect the northern part of the state, but there is any chance that it might loop back around and affect southeastern Florida?
I think that would be a very low probability at this time. It's still North Florida that we're concerned about. We're certainly concerned about drifting back to the west and impacting on the Panhandle, where they've already evacuated once. So we've got a serious dilemma tonight.
Okay, we'll be watching it with you, Dr. Frank. Thank you for your help this afternoon, and we'll be back a little bit later on to update you on the hurricane, along with all the weather across the nation and in the rest of the state of Florida. Stephanie and Rick?
Okay, thanks, Bob. As you saw in our first reports tonight, Hurricane Elena is lashing the west coast.
News Center 7's Don Dare is standing by in the middle of it all via our News Star 7 satellite again. He joins us live now from Crystal River. Don?
Well, Rick, I'm standing in the center of the city of Crystal River, and as you can see, the water from the river is all around us. The river started rising here about 5 o'clock this afternoon. It's approximately 6 feet above flood stage. According to the latest weather forecast, the storm is about 40 to 45 miles west of here. We're about 3 miles east of the Gulf of Mexico. The only people who are here tonight are the emergency crews. All the townspeople have been moved about 30 miles down the road. But, you know, it's kind of funny because there's no effects of Elena yet except for the rain. Recently, the wind has calmed down and the rain is beginning to taper off, but everyone here in Crystal River is braced for the worst. Rick and Stephanie?
Don, these areas we're talking about right now are not high in density as far as population goes, right? Which is one good thing of all this.
No, Crystal River is a population of about 1,000 people. Up the road earlier today, we were in Yankeetown. That has a population of just a couple of hundred people, and everyone from both of those towns and all the towns north of here have been evacuated.
But we're talking about a part of Florida that's not densely populated.
No, but maybe about 4 or 5 miles east of here, there are a lot of people.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's what they're worried about.
Thank you very much, Don, for that report.
That's News Center 7's Don Dare reporting live from Crystal River. And okay, Bob, thanks. Thousands of West Coast residents are out of their homes tonight, weathering Hurricane Elena in makeshift shelters.
We're going back there right now. News Center 7's Brian Cabell is standing by live via the News Star 7 satellite in Chiefland. Brian.
Rick, normally Chiefland High School gym is used for basketball, as you well know. Tonight we are going to have a giant slumber party here. 250 to 300 people have checked in since 1 o'clock. That's when they first determined there would be a threat here. Right now they are eating dinner compliments of the school district. They are trying to sleep. The children are playing. This is a playground for them. People are playing guitar. They're listening to radio, watching TV, trying to find out what's going to happen. But they're going to spend the night here tonight, perhaps again tomorrow, depending on what Elena does. One of the evacuees is this gentleman, Mr. Paul Zenz, I believe it is. You are from where, sir?
Right now from Chiefland.
Chiefland. What kind of home do you live in? On the coast or a mobile home? What?
No, it was a mobile home, but it's permanent now.
And they told you to get out of your home, I guess, huh?
Well, with the storm coming, we just got out.
Is it going to be there when you get back, do you think?
Well, good question, but I believe it will be.
Good luck to you, sir. Enjoy your night. Try to enjoy your night.
All right, thank you.
One of the worst hit spots here, of course, is Cedar Keys, is about 30 miles from here. It's been flooded. Let's take a look at that video real quickly, if we could. 70-mile-per-hour winds now hitting it. It's been a bad place to be. We will not be able to get out there this evening as we were intending to do because they are now flooded over entirely. But again, these people, they're going to spend the night here. They may spend a couple of nights here. And it's kind of a festival atmosphere in a sense, but it's really kind of a sad situation as well. Rick, back to you.
All right, thank you, Brian.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
That's all. That's News Center 7's Brian Cabell reporting live from Chiefland. And just ahead on News Center 7, the Seminoles sink the Green Wave to win their season opener.
And finally, the Dolphin fans celebrate. Danny Boy is back in town. Doug and all the sports. Next. Good evening. Nearly 1 million people forced to flee their homes tonight as Hurricane Elena threatens the west central coast of Florida. Already, one Daytona Beach man is dead, killed when lightning sparked by Elena toppled a tree, crushing his car.
Right now, Elena is sitting stalled just offshore. News Center 7's Don Dare is standing by live via our News Star 7 satellite in Crystal River with the latest. Don?
Stephanie, everyone is wondering if Elena is ever going to make up her mind. She's been stalled about 50 miles west of Crystal River since noon today. This town, as well as dozens of small communities north and south of us along the Gulf Coast, have been evacuated as thousands, tens of thousands of people have been sent to shelters. Evacuation centers are full tonight. 750 people are crowded into this school near Inverness. They're sleeping wherever they can find a spot. Many have been here a full day already.
We didn't sleep at all last night, and then we haven't slept today. So I haven't slept since when? Friday morning?
Nearly 100 families won't be sleeping at this mobile home park in Leesburg tonight. A tornado spawned by Hurricane Elena ripped through this central Florida community earlier today. There was a lot of damage, but there were no serious injuries.
I think in about 2 seconds it was gone. But in that 2 seconds, did all the damage in the world.
This is Yankeetown along the Gulf Coast. It looks like a ghost town. The governor had ordered mandatory evacuation of people living in low-lying areas. The only ones left in town are emergency workers and one other person, 70-year-old Don Hamlin. He lives alone and says he isn't leaving.
What's use of not know? I mean, they come through here waking everybody up about 2:30 last night. They couldn't make up their mind where it was going to go, so I ain't going to go nowhere either.
Of course, besides Mr. Hamner, there are other people in town, men like Wallace Payne, the city manager of Crystal River. Mr. Payne, about an hour or so ago, I saw some National Guard troops. Who called them out, and what are they doing?
They were put on alert by the Citrus County Commission early this morning. They're basically a backup for our police department, and primarily will be assisting the police department, which is a relatively small department, and will be also assisting the city during cleanup operations when the hurricane passes through.
So they'll be here tonight and tomorrow?
They'll be here tonight and tomorrow, and until such time as the storm is past us.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Wallace Payne, the city manager of Crystal River. A lot of people here are worried. Worried, of course, what Elena is going to do, and worried about their homes. How badly those homes might be damaged when Elena does come ashore. But one thing's for sure, the majority of people, the vast majority of them, are safe tonight. Stephanie and Rick?
Don, I'm wondering, there is a big nuclear power plant there in Crystal River. What's the situation with it, and how is it being affected by the hurricane?
Right, the Crystal River plant is about 9 miles north of us. It's still running tonight, and we're told that there's no threat at all to the plant.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, comforting words. Thank you, Don. That's News Center 7's Don Dale reporting live from Crystal River.
And meteorologist Bob Soper has been monitoring Elena throughout the day. Bob, is she likely to hit land sometime tonight?
It's very difficult to say, Stephanie. You know, we're talking about the center all the time, but really they're feeling the effects already. And as the storm continues to drift around out there, it's hard to say when it will move inland. We've got very weak steering currents out there, and as you can see, the storm has actually tightened up as it got closer to the shoreline. It still kind of looks like it's moving a little bit to the east, but it's more of a wobble than a movement, I'm afraid. And the current position on the storm puts it at 28.8 north, 83.8 west. That's about 50 miles, the same as it was at 8 o'clock, 50 miles west-southwest of Cedar Key. The winds are still just hustling along there at 100 miles per hour. We've already had quite a few flooded roadways and lots of problems with higher tides than normal. Port St. Joe all the way down to Sarasota, hurricane warnings in effect from Sarasota south to Fort Myers. We've got gale warnings in effect, a tornado watch from the northern part of the peninsula all the way down to a line from West Palm Beach over to Fort Myers. And if you're wondering about these above normal tides, look at the northern part, only a half foot above normal because the winds are coming off the land. But around Tampa up to Cedar Key, about 8 to 12 feet above normal for tonight, especially as the hurricane tries to move its way inland.
But right now it's in a stall.
Right now it's in a stall. We'll talk to Dr. Neil Frank again a little bit later on and find out what's going on.
Okay,
all right, thank
thanks,
you, Bob.
Bob.
All right.
As we reported earlier, nearly 1 million people are evacuating their homes as Hurricane Elena sits stalled off the west central coast of our state.
News Center 7's Brad Cabell is standing by live via our News Star 7 satellite inside one evacuation center in Chiefland, Florida. Brian, what's the latest?
Rick, we are not inside. As you can see, we are outside. It is now bedtime for about 300 people who have made their way to a gymnasium at a high school here. Not exactly the most comfortable conditions, as you can well imagine, but certainly better than being outside where we've had about 6 or 7 inches of rain over the last 12 hours. We're expecting more of the same in the next 12 hours. As bad as it is here, though, it's worse in a place called Cedar Key, which is about 30 miles from here. Sheriff's deputies have now put up a roadblock to Cedar Key, 5 miles from the coast. No one is allowed through because of flooding on the roadway. On the key itself, there's severe flooding, houses and cars underwater. Most of the residents, of course, have fled the island, but we're told about 25 of them remain, along with 5 sheriff's deputies. Their life is now a precarious one because throughout the day, they've been hit with 60 to 70 mile-per-hour winds and rising tides. But again, here in Chiefland, we are now waiting for Elena to do something, either to move into land. We are told that may happen by tomorrow morning, to move out, perhaps weaken, to move elsewhere, or perhaps to just do nothing. We are getting a little bit frustrated. In any case, we are waiting here, and in case you're wondering, yes, I myself will be sleeping on the gymnasium floor tonight. It's going to be a long night. Rick and Stephanie?
Brian, you've been speaking to some of these people affected for the last 4 days. In the past, Floridians have taken hurricanes in a bit of a jovial mood. Are people needing to be convinced of the seriousness of this hurricane?
I think they are. They are used to it around here. They've gone through this every other year or so, so it's almost a matter of course for them. So they aren't jovial perhaps, but they are resigned to the fact that this happens, and they live around here. They expect it.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Try to keep dry and have fun on that gymnasium floor if you can.
Will do.
Okay.
That's Brian Cabell reporting live via News Star 7 satellite from Chiefland, Florida.
Bob Soper joins us again with more on Hurricane Elena. It has really been a crafty character. Not an easy one to predict at all.
Yeah, this is one of those things where the hurricane experts have been toying with the hurricane, and the hurricane has been toying back.
That's for sure.
It's not fair, and I think anybody that would say that it's not fair would be Dr. Neil Frank at the National Hurricane Center. He joins us once again, and I know, Dr. Frank, this is only about your 500th time on TV with us, but we appreciate you coming on again. Like to know, it's near land now, and the latest satellite picture that I saw looked like it tightened up a little bit. Did you see something there? Any change in the structure of the storm?
Well, certainly as the eye would get smaller, we would not be surprised if it would begin to spin slower, because hurricanes are just like ice skaters. You pull your arms in, you spin faster. But we've had no evidence from the NOAA plane that's out there monitoring the system that there's been any strength at all tonight.
Is there any chance now that as it gets closer to land that it might lose some of its strength?
Well, it's got to get the center over land to do that, and there's no evidence that it's going to do that tonight. The steering currents or the rivers of air that push these things along are just non-existent. You know, the river dried up tonight, and what you've got essentially is just a top spinning out in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. You know, you spin a top out on the table, and it just meanders and does its own thing. It doesn't stay in one place. That's what's happening out there tonight.
Well, what is it now that we would look for to help to move this thing along?
Well, the only thing that we see in the foreseeable future that might help us a little bit is a building ridge of high pressure, you know, that could spread across the northern part of the storm into the southeastern part of the United States. That could nudge it a little bit further west and at least get it far enough offshore that some of those folks up there could get some relief.
Right, well, the big problem now is where is this going to go, and a lot of people are out of their homes. Do you have any estimate at all what we could expect next? Will it be 3, 4, or do you have any wild guess?
No, nothing at all. We'll just have to wait until the atmosphere decides to create another river to move this also. So we're looking for a river tonight.
All right, well, we'll look for one with you also, and thank you very much for joining us once again. Now, currently in South...
Meteorologist Bob Soper is keeping an eye on Elena, as he's been doing for the last several days. He's here with us now. What's the latest?
Well, she's still hanging around out there. You know, it tried to make an approach on Cedar Key and now changed her mind, is moving toward the west, and we're keeping a track on it. It looks like right now Apalachicola or Panama City are dead center of where it is most likely to make landfall now. However, we know it's been capricious. It keeps trying to move around out there, and it's hanging on even stronger yet. It's up to 125 mile-per-hour winds. Notice the dot in the center of the hurricane. that is the eye of the storm. And look how it wobbles, and as it wobbles, it gets closer and closer to Apalachicola. But it looks like it's going to graze Apalachicola, although they already have winds of 95 miles per hour there, and it may move on and slide along the coastline, perhaps to Panama City. Maybe, if they're unlucky, it'll move to Pensacola. Right now, it's 40 miles southwest of Apalachicola, 135 miles east-southeast of Pensacola. The winds are up to 125 miles per hour. Strike percentages, a very good chance that it'll move in somewhere around Apalachicola or Panama City. Lesser chance over to New Orleans, but we know what this thing has done before. Hurricane warnings are off from Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, around to Yankeetown, which is right near Cedar Key, and gale warnings on either side of that hurricane warning vicinity. And there's a tornado watch over much of North and Central Florida until midnight tonight. Take a look at the Elena's path when it started out as a tropical depression just around the Woodward Passage on the east end of Cuba. It moved into the central part of that area and became a storm on August 28th. Since August 29th, we've been tracking it as a hurricane, and you can see it has wiggle-wobbled all the way across the Gulf of Mexico, just about using up every extent of the eastern half of the Gulf, and now right off the shoreline up around Apalachicola. And it continues to cause problems for us. Rain chances tonight in North Florida, miserable. About 100% chance, but by tomorrow it should be around 70% chance. The problem is, we haven't had any stirring currents. At the beginning, there was a high-pressure cell off the southeast coast. It was nudging it up toward the north. It looked pretty good. Then the high kind of faded out, and the low took over, mainly the hurricane.
And can we tell anything from those stirring currents right now where it's going to go?
Right now, it looks like a high-pressure cell is building up along the southeast coast again in the upper atmosphere, and that may be helping to direct it a little bit. All it needs is a slight nudge to move one direction or the other. Looks like it's getting it now from that upper-level high.
Okay. We'll check back in with you.
We'll hope that it can get its life ended quickly.
Okay. Thanks,
right.
Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Tonight, residents along the west coast hope they've seen the last of Hurricane Elena. News Center 7's Brian Cabell is tracking the storm and joins us now live from Chiefland, Florida. Brian.
Stephanie, as you reported, the really serious threat has apparently been removed from this area. As a consequence, the road show will continue. We started following this hurricane back on Wednesday in Key West. We followed it through Mississippi, through Alabama, down the Panhandle, now in Chiefland, and now we will head north and west in just about 1 hour. Along with us on this roadshow has been Dan Satterfield, a meteorologist. This has to have been one of the more frustrating experiences for you.
You know, meteorologists, we've been telling everyone for years, we can't predict these things. We do our best. We have all the satellites, the computers, but I think this storm has illustrated that perfectly. I think I'm the first meteorologist in history to go 900 miles for a storm that hit his own backyard.
It's going to get worse before it gets better, presumably.
From the track this storm is taking, even if it doesn't make landfall on the Florida coast, it's still going to lash the coast probably with, hurricane to maybe 90-mile-per-hour winds all the way across to Pensacola, and then maybe go in toward Mobile.
Okay. We'll see you in the truck in about an hour or so, Dan. Thank you very much. The people here in Chiefland, there's about 250 of them still in the high school gymnasium. They have been told not to go home. Some of them have gone home. The rest will probably be going home in the next day or two. And as they go home, we will go off in search of Elena. Rick and Stephanie?
Brian Cabell in search of Elena. Brian, it seems some people are being told evacuate, then go back to your home, then evacuate, then go back to your home. Or this seems to be the progress of the thing, especially part of in the Panhandle. What kind of effect will this have on new evacuations? Do you think people will start to say, oh, forget it?
I think, yeah, some of the authorities have been crying wolf for quite a while, but justifiably so. You can't take a chance on something like this. The people on Cedar Key could have been wiped out today. The fact that they have made it doesn't mean that you don't have to worry about it anymore, but that's the way hurricanes are. As Dan said, you cannot really predict these things. We'll find out tomorrow where it's going to hit. It may not hit for another 2 or 3 days. Nobody knows.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thanks. That's News Center 7's Brian Cabell reporting live from Chiefland, Florida.